Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. And today we have almost Zweig here for a new video conversation. And the topic today is monogamy. In other words, the institution of marriage between one couple, two persons, and only two persons, instead of polygamy, that is multiple persons. So we decided to discuss this issue. It's still in today's society, even though we have a lot of liberalism and progressivism and moral relativism, still monogamy is a very common perception concerning marriage. It's a general in society view that monogamy, that's how marriage should be, and polygamy is still not accepted in many places, though there seems to be among some leftist or liberal groups a tendency to perhaps promote that as well sooner or later. But that's not a good idea, because monogamy is how marriage should be, as I affirm. So, Amos, perhaps we could begin the discussion about monogamy, about the essence of monogamy, even though it's very brief to just say what the definition of monogamy is. But you could perhaps just start off by talking about monogamy itself and your initial thoughts about it.
Yes, thank you very much, Christoffer. So, as you said, monogamy is easy to define what it means, or there are perhaps a couple of variations, but what it means is that one man can only have one woman as his wife. And the most common different form of organization is polygamy, as you have said. Now, you can ask, well, if I can divorce my current wife and then remarry another wife, or if my wife dies, if I can then marry a second wife, or if it's just one and that's it, but at least one at a time, that at least has to be given, else you cannot talk about monogamy. And monogamy for me is a very interesting topic, because maybe very briefly, why I think it is such an important social institution. I think it's one of the absolutely crucial social institutions, and the point is quite simple to understand. If you look in the animal kingdom, amongst almost all mammals, and I think many other animals like birds or I don't know what, but almost all mammals have this situation that one male tries to occupy as many females as possible. So he has like a group of females, and then there is one male who defends his territory with these females on it against other males who try to basically chase him away and take over this territory and the females. And of course, if you believe in the theory of evolution, as I do, then this behavior makes a lot of sense, because each one male can produce many children with many different women, whereas women cannot produce as many children because they are pregnant and then they have to breastfeed. And so if from the point of view of trying to spread your genes as far as you can, this behavior is exactly what you would expect. And the problem, however, is that societies like animal groups that function like that, the males are basically just fighting all the time. So there is never a time of peace and stability, because always there is some challenger who tries to defeat the alpha male and become the alpha male himself. And now in human societies, there is a huge advantage to having cooperation within a large group, so within a tribe or even within a country. And human beings are, I think, the only animals that cooperate in this large amount, in this large group size. Now, some people might say, yes, ants do that too, but ants are different because they are not all capable of reproducing. Only the queen can reproduce. But human beings, each human being can reproduce. And so, okay, so we have that settled. Now, the point is, if you want to have cooperation within the group, then you have to limit the amount of fighting that happens, because fighting destroys cooperation logically. And so if you have this social institution called monogamy, then each male gets one female, and that leaves, because there are roughly 50% male and female, that leaves almost for every man a woman, and therefore the potential for conflict over who gets this woman is at least drastically reduced. And I think that is, for me, the reason why monogamy is absolutely an essential institution for any kind of advanced or complex society.
Yes, thank you very much, Amos. That was a very, very good point that you brought up there, a very good argument in favor of monogamy, that we see monogamy as a very important institution to secure order in human society and avoid lots of conflict. Because as you said, when you have one female to reproduce with and live with exclusively this female, then there is no question of seeking other female and having rivals and conflicts and things like that. So it's an institution to secure a natural order in human society and secure cooperation and peace among its members, as you now argued. I think that's a very good point and very good argument. And also, I think it's also what the history shows us to be the case. Monogamy is a very common institution in the West as well as in other places. Now, polygamy is practiced some places. It's true. You have, for instance, Mormons in the United States. Some of them still practice polygamy, though it's very restricted with regards to law. I think it's only the state of Utah who has it legalized. Elsewhere, it's not. And monogamy is very common, and it's common throughout history, and it has worked. To put it like that, it has worked, and it's very natural. And I think also it seems to be it's like an instinct in human beings that, of course, it's natural to or it's good for the family as a whole and society to have one female to keep to. When it comes to, for instance, relationships or romantic relationships, people comprehend that there is something necessary about that relationship being between two people, and that if a person in the relationship cheats with another female, if the male cheats with another female, everyone understands that he has done something very wrong. He has violated a very important trust and bond of that relationship of which he participated. So people understand that romance and romantic love involves exclusivity with two people and only those two people. So to have a relationship that is so-called open relationships, it's unnatural. It's not how it's supposed to be. I think people have sort of an instinct that's how it is. So that's also another fact that points toward monogamy as being true and good and polygamy being bad. Yes, what do you think of these considerations?
Yes, I think it's an interesting consideration that you have brought up here. And I have two particular thoughts on this issue. The first one is that I think what the reason why we today in many societies have this feeling that it is natural and good that one man should only have one woman, and that cheating or having multiple partners is kind of a little bit strange, or of course cheating is immoral. I think the reason for this is that throughout history, societies that did practice monogamy have outcompeted societies that practiced polygamy. Because in a society where you have polygamy, typically the most successful male has a lot of females, and then the next lower level of social status still has a lot of females, though not as many as, for example, the king or the highest in the pyramid. And then at the bottom, you have a lot of males who don't find any woman at all. And these males will become very restless, and they will have a large incentive to overthrow the organization of their own society in which they live. Because if a huge social chaos emerges and the guy with 200 women gets killed, then 200 men have a chance of getting a woman for themselves. And so these societies have much more infighting, and therefore were less strong against in a military competition against a society that did practice monogamy, because there, yes, there was not so much infighting, and so they had more energy to focus towards the outside. So I think that's one important point why this feeling that monogamy is actually good and right has, I would say, evolved over time. And I think also a second, or maybe if you want to say something to that, then you might go ahead, and then I have also a second point.
Yeah, just one comment. I think that's a very interesting point that you brought up there, and the point about how if you have a huge scarcity of the potential to create families and find a female because of this high concentration with one person, that can create disorder, revolt, and overthrowing. That's also a very good argument for monogamy. But also, I would say that the instinct that it's wrong to cheat and that romance is to be exclusively among two people, I think that touches upon the sort of the essence of romance, the essence of a romantic relationship. Not simply because it's beneficial for society as a whole, but a deeper reality about romantic relationship itself, that you grasp it, that it's supposed to be exclusively between those two people.
Yes, I would agree. I think, of course, one thing is it's a different thing to have an openly polygamous society and to cheat on your husband or your wife. So I think cheating in particular is problematic in any case, because you undermine the trust that is, and trust is an essential glue kind of that holds a society together, because you can only cooperate with other people if you trust that they will not go behind your back. So I think that's a problem there. But as you said, it goes also further that Jordan Peterson formulated this very nicely. He said, you can only have a very deep relationship if this relationship is exclusive. Because if you have, first off, just because of the time limitation, if you have 4 wives, then you have only 1/4 of the time that you spend with each one of them. And so you will never get to know them as well. And the second point is also, as we talked about in marriage in our last conversation, if you are married to someone and you cannot leave that person, then if this person has some kind of habit that you find annoying, or maybe that is kind of problematic, then it is in your best interest to help this person grow and overcome this bad habit and improve, because you will be together with this person for the rest of your life. But if you have 4 wives and one of them is just annoying, well, then you just won't visit her anymore and you've solved the problem already. And so this idea of a relationship where 2 people really also help each other grow and really get to know each other, not just superficially based on lust or mutual advantage, but get to know each other really deep, like the whole person, I think that has to, or that cannot really happen in a polygamous scenario.
Yes, you brought up a very good point there. Yeah, by the way, perhaps there was something more that you were going to say before I would respond, or should I just respond now?
No, you can go ahead.
Okay, yes. Right, I think that you touched upon an important reality or consideration there, that a deep romantic relationship is supposed to be exclusive. Now, when it comes to how that is, I imagine that a person who defends polygamy could say, well, not necessarily, because you could have multiple friends whom you have a strong relationship with, but that doesn't mean that you can only have one friend. You can have multiple friends whom you know very well. So why can't you do the same with wives in a marriage? And I have an answer to that argument, but if you want to go ahead and answer that argument first, you can. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I do think it's an interesting question, though, as I think I will give the same answers that I have just explained before. That first of all, I mean, there are people who know their friends better than their wife, but I think that's just a very sad sign that they are spending a lot more time with their friends than they are spending time with their wife. But the thing is, the more time you will spend with a person, the better you will get to know them, and the more intimate you will come with them, to the point where you understand each other, often even without speaking, because you just know what the other person is thinking or feeling already. And the second point is that if you have to remain with someone, then you have an incentive of helping them to grow. Whereas if you don't have to remain with someone, then you don't have this incentive necessarily, or at least not as strong.
Right, yes. Yeah, because the polygamist might say that that to have multiple wives is analogous to having multiple friends, and that's just as you can have multiple friends, you can have multiple wives. But I think you touch upon an important thing to consider, that there is a sort of a qualitative difference between a romantic relationship in a marriage and friendship, because though friendship is very noble and great and valuable and can be deep and have a lot of good benefits to both of the friends, and that the friends can help each other to grow and become more virtuous, etc. Still, to be married to someone involves knowing them on a deeper level. It means that they're going to be a part of your everyday life in such an intimate way that your friends will not have with you. So we sort of reach a level of relationship. The essence of relationship in a marriage is such on a deep level that it must involve exclusivity. What do you think of this consideration?
I think I was just thinking, if you take, for example, a tribal society where the men spend kind of every day, all day in the woods hunting, and the women spend every day, all day around the village, kind of taking care of whatever, growing food and the children and stuff like that, then perhaps you will know your friends better than your wife, because you spend more time with them and your life depends on them when you are out hunting. So I think in that scenario, it might be the case that it will be different. But I think in a society similar to the one in which we live, I think there it has a lot of benefits of organizing it in the opposite fashion, that you know your wife better than your friends. And one of these reasons is, and perhaps this goes in the direction that you are thinking, if you have children with a wife and you have an interest in, you have a natural interest that your children will do well in the world, then you have a common project, and this will keep you together. And so typically what happens, if you move, then you move with your family, but you will find new friends. And so from this perspective, from this organization, it makes a lot of sense that you will invest more time and energy into having a good and deep and understanding relationship with your wife than with your friends, even though having good friends is also very important.
Right. So in other words, we could say that when you have a man and a woman in a marriage, having children that binds them, that makes the relationship inflexible.
Yes. And I think I would add that this is so perhaps even more in a society where you have to take care of your children for a longer time, like in our society where children have to go to school and learn a job. And now, even though today this is way out of hand, I think in the Middle Ages, children used to grow up around the time of puberty. That's when they would have become independent enough so they could function in the world without their parents. But still, that is 10 years. Now, if you live, as I said before, in a kind of hunter-gatherer society, basically you don't have to take care of the kids so much anymore after they have reached the age of perhaps 2 or 3, because they will just kind of walk around in the village and play with other kids and kind of grow up and learn how to throw a spear. And then the parents don't have to invest as much into their children so that they will be, so that they manage to find a good place in the world. But in a complex society like today, you have to invest more energy and more time, and therefore you are bound to your partner who has the same goal for a longer time.
Yes, that's a good point. And even if the children are able to sort of grow up and get a job at an early age, still, even in traditional societies, you see that they have a very strong social bond with their parents all their life. So we see this very important consideration that the children are this part of family which you cannot ignore. It's what we have been talking about earlier, the primary purpose of marriage and the family. And here I could touch upon, I suppose, would be my primary argument against polygamy, which is that if you have multiple wives or multiple husbands, for that matter, that creates disorder and confusing when you have children. It is natural for the children to have one mother and one father to relate to. And if you have multiple mothers or multiple fathers, that will just be completely unnatural. It wouldn't be good for the children. So here we see a strong argument for monogamy. It is what is healthy and beneficial and natural for the children in that family.
Yes, I think it's good that we have come again, as we did in our last conversation, to this point that the children are the common link. And I think the children are the main reason why, or are yet a second reason why monogamy is important for a society. So the first reason is, as we said, if a lot of men have no woman, then they will become aggressive and they will start to tear down the society. And the second reason is that it is better and more stable and, as you said, less chaotic for children to grow up in a two-parent household. And now this is a point, probably some people will not like this, but it still, I think, is very important. You can make a very strong evolutionary argument for this point as well, because if a man and a woman together have a couple of children, then they are both related to all of these children. And the child shares has half the genes of the father and half the genes of the mother. And so both parents will be interested in keeping their children alive because they are their offspring. And also the siblings amongst each other, they will be equally related. So they have an equal interest in keeping each other alive. Now, if you have a family, and this is no matter if it's polygamy or if it's these patchwork families that are very common today, where there are multiple children from multiple relationships. So for example, let's just say the father has 3 wives and each wife has 1 child with this father. Then the father is related to all 3 of his children, but each mother is only related to 1 child. And so the mother will have a natural evolutionary incentive to give more resources to her own child and to take resources away from the other children with whom she is not related. And this can lead to intense hatred and conflict and even murder or suppression within the family, because now these relationship links are not symmetric. And also, of course, the children will be less related to each other. If you have, for example, husband has a child from his first marriage and mother has a child from her first marriage, and now these 2 marry and form a family, then these 2 children are not related at all. And so they will have completely different genes, which means they will view each other more as rivals and less as allies. And so this is a part of the problem why having different children with different people creates more aggression and hostility inside a family.
Yes, that's a very good point you brought up there, very important considerations. And I also think, yes, as you have been talking about, if you have a child in a polygamous marriage, it would be like the child has 1 mother and multiple stepmothers, and it will be a very strange scenario. And of course, the natural mother would not have the same relationship to the child as the stepmothers. The stepmother relationship would be more artificial. And if they have their own children, as you say, they will tend to have their own children treated in another way than the other children, which is more of a stepson, stepmother relationship. And even though, of course, there can be exceptions, this is the natural tendency that it's not going to be the same, in other words, and that's going to create a lot of problems and confusion in the family. It destroys order, that there is a natural, simple order to how the members in that family relate to each other. So that's a very important point to consider, yes.
Yes, and I think you said it well, that there will be exceptions and people can, of course, still have a free will and can try, and also successfully try, not to follow these tendencies that we have now described. But the biological drive will still be there somewhere. And it is much more easier and simpler, and less problems come up and then have to be dealt with if you have this more orderly organization where just 1 man and 1 woman are together and have a family together. And I guess you could even say that, though this will not be popular today as well, that it's even better if this is the first romantic relationship that these 2 people had in their lives, because then you will not have some kind of weird argument where all of a sudden the wife says, you are like, why do you always do this? My last husband was much better, he did this and that, and then already you have a great source of conflict again. Whereas if 2 people just form a relationship and then figure out together how they want to best organize their lives, then this kind of problem also cannot come up.
Right. So if one of the partners, or both for that matter, had earlier relationship, they can sort of try to compare their early ones to the present one, and that might create problems.
I mean, it will happen naturally. You cannot not compare two things that you both know which are similar. So, but I think this would be a source of conflict. And also, I mean, if you have split up 10 times already, then why not do it once more? I mean, it's no big step anymore.
Yes, that's a very good point. And the seriousness of commitment in that relationship becomes weaker and weaker, and it becomes sort of a habit to not treat it as serious as you should do. So that's
Yes.
a very good point.
Yes, and also you will, I think, not only develop this habit, but it might also even be a form of protecting yourself. Because if you invest, if you give all of your best into something, and then into a relationship, and then the other person terminates this relationship, then you will feel very hurt, because you have invested really all that you can, and now it was just basically said to your face, yeah, well, you weren't good enough, so I took someone else. And so one way to deal with that is, certainly after a couple of times that this happens to you, you say, why should I even give my best? I'm only opening myself up to be hurt. And so then you will naturally tend to stay on a more superficial level in a relationship and not open yourself up. And this will lead to impoverished relationships in the future.
Yes, that's a good point. And as we have been talking about earlier, marriage is not simply convenience. It involves work and commitment and things you have to do that you may not like. And it involves a lot of things and duties and work that one has to do. And as we were talking about romantic feelings, they might change. So in order for the marriage to really be secure, you have to be connected to something deeper than mere romance. It has to be deep love for each other. And if you have polygamy, and there's always a possibility of the husband, for instance, to just find new wives to seek, that is very problematic, because maybe he thinks that, oh, that old wife which I have married, the marriage involves so much labor and work, and now my feelings have changed. So now I want to date someone new because I want someone new in my life, and then just continues on that path. So instead of knowing that I have to stick to this person and be responsible and mature in how I work this relationship, it becomes a sort of escapism, if that's the term that can be used, because now you will think about other potential new wives to consider and put your focus there instead of focusing on the wife you're already married.
Yes, I think that's a good point there that you brought up, and 2 points actually. The first one is a marriage involves a lot of work and commitment, as we have discussed last time, and people will only be willing to invest this work because you have to invest it up front, and then after some time you will get the reward. But if you are very uncertain if you will get this reward at all, because either partner might just break up and search for a new partner, or the husband might just take a new wife, then if you are uncertain, then you will be less willing to invest this work and commitment. And so I think that's an important point there. And yeah, I think the second point was polygamy kind of makes sense if you look at human beings more or less just like animals. Because as we have said, in the animal kingdom, most animals function like that. Not all, you have to say. So for example, the giant penguin in the southern ice fields, they have monogamous relationships, but most animals have polygamy. But animals, basically, they just reproduce. So if the only goal is to just produce as many babies of yourself as you can, and then not really care so much what happens to them, then polygamy is probably more efficient. But for example, from a point of view of the spiritual development of the two people involved, then certainly, as you have just said before, monogamy is much more beneficial, because it forces you to work on yourself and work on your partner and work together. And through that, you grow and you evolve as a person beyond just being capable of producing babies.
Yes, that's a good point. That if you consider it from spiritual development, from the person, as you said, and virtue and raising the children, and also the good of society as a whole, as you have argued, then monogamy is what that is the institution of marriage that everyone should respect and practice, indeed. And yes, according to lust, then it's just finding new persons to have sexual acts with, without thinking about responsibility. But if you are going to have responsibility, which is what you should do, then monogamy is essential there. So I think that's an important point. Yeah.
Yes, and I think because of all of this that we have talked about now, it is, in my view, something very problematic that is happening at the moment in our society, that this idea of monogamy is more and more getting undermined. And now, as you have said in the beginning, still in most countries, it is not legal to have more than one wife. And also still in many social circles, it is still not accepted if you have more than one wife. You will get very severe criticism from the people around you, but it is kind of getting weaker and weaker. So, for example, if you have many children with many wives, then all of these children will be, how do you say, taken care of through the social system. And so there isn't really any criticism for that. You will not go to jail, for example, if you cannot pay for your own children, or you will not just go to jail if you have children with more than one partner, or all things like that. And in the younger age, it's now very common to just sleep around with everyone as you please, basically. And also families that break apart and reorganize in this patchwork style, it's not really that uncommon anymore, and it's also not really frowned upon. So I think, and also if you look, for example, at the lives of celebrities, sorry to talk so long, you can see that all the time, that if you are, for example, a famous football player, there was this story that a comedian told once. A famous football player went to Los Angeles for going out, and there was basically just a whole group of attractive women waiting there for him that all wanted to sleep with him. And so as long as this guy doesn't marry, he basically lives a polygamous lifestyle. And so in the culture, this is very much falling apart, also in Hollywood and all that stuff.
Right, yeah, those are good points which you bring up. And also we see that because of relativism and liberalism, etc., the understanding of marriage is becoming more and more destroyed. Like when many countries have passed homosexual quote marriage, and now it's no longer about a man and a woman. Now you can have two men or two females marrying each other, even though that's invalid. So that shows that the understanding of marriage is getting destroyed. So if you can have homosexual quote marriage, then why not polygamy? So if you take the logic down the road, you eventually end up promoting that as well. And I think it's only a question of time before people are going to promote that in an increasing degree, unfortunately.
Yes, I think that's a very good point that you brought up there. This is kind of the second the second side of the coin, where I was talking about it's more and more not being lived. And then, as you said, the other side is that the concept of marriage is getting more and more hollowed out, because it used to be about a man and a woman forming a family, and the family aspect and the having children aspect and raising them was a crucial part of it. And now it's basically just a kind of a little bit stronger than just saying we are now a couple, because you can be together and you can divorce, and that's more or less a standard procedure now. And as you said, you can have two men marrying even though they cannot have children, or two women. And so the concept is very much getting undermined. And it's interesting that you mentioned liberalism, because as we have said, sometimes I used to be a liberal myself. I actually used to call myself an anarcho-capitalist for quite a couple of years. So I believed that every man or every woman, every human being should have the complete freedom to do with their own property whatever they want. And this question of monogamy was exactly the topic that brought me away from being an anarcho-capitalist, because I understood that if you have the complete freedom to do with your body what you want, then of course you can have polygamy. You can marry 10 men and 15 women if you want. But what I understood is that this will bring a civilization down. It will destroy a society. And so it cannot be right.
Yes, that's very good points you brought up there. And also interesting that you told about how you got out of libertarianism because of monogamy, because it's such an important institution in society, and it shows the falsity of the libertarian ethics and view of society in general. So that's a good point, indeed. And yeah, do you want to add anything to that particular issue?
No, I don't know anything right at the moment.
Right, yes. It seems that we have been talking a lot about this issue of monogamy now, and brought up very good and important points. So perhaps this is the point where we could conclude this conversation, unless there is another consideration you want to bring up before we do that.
I think there is one more perhaps useful point. And Jordan Peterson talked about this very, very nicely, because if you are, I mean, as probably most, if not all men know, the drive to want to have sex with a woman that you find attractive can be very strong. And in some sense, it can almost be impossible to give a strong argument, a stronger argument why you shouldn't just sleep with as many women as you can, because this drive is very strong. But what Jordan Peterson said is, do you really want to just be a casual partner of other people? Because if you sleep with a lot of women, then of course, just as these women are not very important to you, you will also not be very important to them. You will just also be one of many partners that they sleep with. And therefore, you are not a very serious partner of someone, but you are just a casual partner. And that means the moment that you stop functioning like earning a lot of money or being very attractive, you will just get dropped, because why should anyone care about you more than you have cared about them? And so that is also a strong argument why monogamy is also good, even for the powerful men in a society that would have the option of getting more than one woman. Not just that your society will not fall apart, but also it will make you personally stronger, because you will have someone at your side who will really stick to you, who will really also help you up when you are down. And I think that's also an important consideration.
Yes, good point. And we can say that people desire to be truly loved and not be used. And I think that when you have a marriage that is monogamous, then you know that your partner has decided to be with you for the rest of her life and not date anyone else and be committed. So you see that there is a real sort of self-sacrifice involved there, a real true love, and not simply being used. And that's very noble and valuable in itself. And to destroy that, it's a huge tragedy and mistake for people to try to do that. Yeah.
Yes, I think that's a wonderful point to end on. And I think being truly loved is an even higher blessing and an even more beautiful experience than just experiencing sexual lust. So yes, that's a great point to end on.
Yes, I thought that was a good consideration. Thank you. Right, so we have discussed many aspects of marriage concerning monogamy versus polygamy, why monogamy is the true form of marriage, which is moral, and polygamy is bad and contrary to how marriage is, and the benefits of monogamy and the huge problems concerning polygamy. So I think we have made very good points. I hope the audience agreed with our points. And yes, I think we have a great discussion now. So I thank you very much, Amos, for being on here to talk about monogamy. And I will wish you and the audience a great Wednesday, and I will let you have the last word.
Yes, I would just say thank you very much for having me on. I think this is a very important conversation to have today. And so if you find this video useful, then perhaps spread it, because it's really important. And yes, thank you for listening, and thank you for having me on, and see you all later.
Great. Goodbye.
Goodbye.